What's up, Story Geeks? It's Jay Sherer, author of the time travel novel Time Slingers. I'm rocking the merch today. Here to talk to you again about The Rocketeer, which is one of my favorite movies. I love The Rocketeer. But today we're actually going to talk about why you might not like The Rocketeer. And this is some of the reasons that I struggle with the story myself. So if you want to know why I like The Rocketeer and why I think there's some really engaging storytelling techniques being used in The Rocketeer, then check out the previous video that I posted. Check out that video first if you want to hear all of the positive things that are happening in this story that make us really, really like it. But today, we're also talking about why we might not like The Rocketeer. As I talked about in the last video, I'm doing this series because a lot of times what we find is that people clash over movies. Of course, we love movies, we love stories. And so what happens is I say, I love this story, and then you say, I hate this story. And too many times on Twitter especially, we come to blows almost on these things, but we never talk about why we like them or why we don't like them. And I think a more well-rounded conversation would be helpful to exploring this very topic. I've got a bunch of notes about why you might not like The Rocketeer. So let's start with personal preference and ideology. These are things that, aren't necessarily related to the storytelling per se, but are related to elements of the setup or elements of the way that the story has been given to us that we may not prefer or that we may have a different ideological perspective on. So, what personal preferences or ideologies could we find in The Rocketeer that we would prefer not be there? Or, said differently, maybe there's some stuff we want in there that's not in there. For me, I would prefer a lot more diversity. Obviously, this takes place in the 1930s. Obviously, it takes place relative to old Hollywood. We already know that old Hollywood had a bunch of problems related to diversity. Let's just face it, Hollywood wasn't casting those people. That's not good. That's a total bummer. I would like to see more diversity in The Rocketeer. If Disney ever reboots it, which, by the way, I totally hope they do, I would like to see them include a more diverse cast here. Also, I do not believe that there's any point in this movie where it passes the Bechdel Test. Obviously, the Bechdel Test is a test relative to female characters, and if we're giving enough weight to female characters in this film. We also see that Jenny is sort of used as like a damsel in distress. That's sort of an old school thing. It would be cooler if they added some more female characters that were more interesting to this particular story, at least in my opinion. Doesn't mean that it's a bad story. Again, I love The Rocketeer. I think The Rocketeer is amazing. We're just talking about the fact that it could be improved in these particular areas, and that may be why you don't like it. You also might not be into adventure stories or historical fiction or aviation, all of which this story relies upon to get its point across. Now, let's talk about the actual storytelling elements that are either present or not present, and maybe we don't like the story as much because the storytellers haven't really gone far enough for us. The first one I'll put out there is that I don't think that Clifford, the main character, the Rocketeer, I don't think that he's instantly likable. In fact, he seems kind of arrogant. Now, when we watch a story, we want to have characters that we associate to, that we want to be around, that we want to be next to, characters that we would find friendship in. It doesn't mean that our characters are perfect. Far from it. Characters, generally speaking, have some sort of fatal flaw that's imperative for them to overcome in order for them to win the day. Well, the Rocketeer just feels kind of arrogant. Yeah, sure, he is poor and needs money to be able to do some of the things that he wants to do related to aviation. You would think that would sort of make us more on his team, sort of like to see the underdog win. But in this case, he just comes off as kind of entitled, and he comes off as kind of a brat. And the way he treats Jenny makes us kind of feel like he's kind of a jerk. So I would argue that despite the fact that I love this movie and I love The Rocketeer, it is kind of hard to like him, especially early on in the movie and early on in the setup. Now, one of the things that we want to make sure that characters have is a character arc where they grow and learn. That for sure happens with Clifford's character in The Rocketeer. But I don't know if he ever fully learns his lesson. He does change in regards to knowing that he needs to sacrifice something for Jenny. But he does kind of just pull off the same harebrained schemes that he's had in the past again. So I would argue that Clifford isn't maybe the most likable character out there. Now, Peavy is. Peavy is a phenomenal character. I think most people will instantly like Peavy. He's very well reasoned. He wants to do the brave thing, but he also wants to do the right thing. Therefore, we kind of root for Peavy, even if we're not necessarily always rooting for Clifford. Then you can introduce Jenny to this scenario too, because I don't think that Jenny is necessarily inherently likable. We sort of want to see her succeed as an actress, but she also seems a little bit entitled. Now, some of it may be because Clifford and Jenny are both pretty young, and the storytellers want us to see them as having some of the arrogance and maybe naivety of youth. But it comes across a little bit too strong for me, and therefore it's a little bit harder for me to really like their characters. Now, for context, I do like Jenny's character a little bit more than Clifford's character, at least in the beginning of the story. If the storytellers had made these characters a little less entitled, we may be more likely to root for them. Obviously, Jenny's a struggling actress. We want to see her succeed. Maybe if we saw her struggle a little bit more, we would kind of see that, oh, this is an underdog. We really want her to win. Likewise with Clifford, maybe if he wasn't so negligent about Jenny, or we could see that he really loved Jenny behind the scenes, but he just was in front of her a little clumsy, that would give us more reason to really like his character and maybe root for him a little bit more in the beginning of this film. But if you started watching this film and thought, I don't really like these characters and I don't really know why I'm rooting for them, I think you'd have a pretty good reason for saying that. The final thing I'm going to talk about is the logical inconsistencies in the film. Now, obviously, it's a film about a guy with a rocket pack. There's a lot of things that would go real wrong here, right? Like, he's not wearing a pressurized suit. The science is obviously pseudoscience. I'm not necessarily talking about that. That's just something we buy into, like with Star Wars. Space doesn't work the way that it works in Star Wars, not in real life, but we still love Star Wars. I still love the Rocketeer, despite the fact that the science probably would never work this way. However, there's still some things that would cause us to not suspend our disbelief. What's an example of that? The best example of it is the fact that there's a Nazi blimp in Southern California. Now, I don't know where the Nazis came from. I don't know how they got to Southern California. They have a giant Nazi flag on the side of the blimp. I don't think that that was likely to happen. I don't think that that's likely to happen at all. And so therefore, when we look at a film like this and we see something like that, we kind of go, wait a minute, how did this happen? And then it doesn't really seem like it maybe is something we want to root for anymore. In this case, I went ahead and went along with it. I went ahead and suspended my disbelief anyways, because I'm so into the fact that the Rocketeer is going to fight the Nazis, and that's really exciting to me. But if you said, oh man, this is completely bogus, and I don't think that this would be something that would happen, you'd be right too. So as a quick recap, here are some of the reasons why you may not have liked the Rocketeer. Personal preference, you might have said you wanted more diversity, like I would say. You might have said that it didn't pass the Bechdel test and you would prefer that it did, and that there were stronger female characters. I think that that's a good thing to say. You also might not like adventure stories or historical fiction or fiction about aviation. I do, so I love that element of it, but maybe you didn't. Also, you may have found the lead character of Clifford and the lead character of Jenny sort of difficult to like at first. And I think there's some good reasons for that in terms of the character development and showcasing how that looks throughout the movie. Even the character arc that Clifford goes on, you could argue is a little weak. Finally, of course you could argue that you couldn't suspend your disbelief, and especially when the Nazi blimp shows up over Los Angeles. That is not likely to happen. Anyways, those are the reasons you may not have liked the Rocketeer, but did I miss any? Give me a comment down below. Are there some of the things that I said that you really agreed with? Are there some of the things that I said that maybe you don't agree with at all? Maybe you have a different opinion on it. The point is having a good quality discussion about these things, so leave me a comment down below and I would love to have a discussion with you. Subscribe for more why you like it or why you maybe didn't like it content right here on the Story Geeks channel. I'm going to be doing more of these why you like it, why you don't like it posts, So if there's a story you would like me to talk about relative to why some people like it and why some people don't, let me know in the comments and I would love to chat about it with you. Also, on the Story Geeks Talk Disney Plus podcast, which there will be a link to in the description, we're gonna actually talk about The Rocketeer. If you're a subscriber to Disney Plus, definitely subscribe to the Story Geeks Talk Disney Plus. It's a channel, a podcast channel dedicated to all of the content on Disney Plus and the Story Geeks digging deeper into it. So if you love Disney stories like The Rocketeer, and if you love talking about those in greater detail, definitely subscribe to that channel. The link will be in the description. Thanks for watching.